Now by retired three-star admiral, former congressman, and candidate for U.S. Senate, Joe Sestak. It's always good to see you, Admiral. You were the director of the Navy Anti-Terrorism Unit. So what do you make of this focus on copycats, homegrown terrorist activity? Is that where you would be going if you were one of the U.S. officials leading the security charge right now?
Chris, yes, I'd focus on that, but that wouldn't be the major focus I would have. I think what we have to recognize is ISIS is no longer just an international terrorist organization. It is more than that. It actually controls territory that is the size of Belgium, that is now in lockdown, a population that's the size of Norway. It just did strikes in Egypt with a Russian airliner. Yes, Paris, but also Ankara and Beirut. This is a wannabe state that now has a state-sponsored foreign policy of state-sponsored terrorism. And if we continue to look at it as just an anti-terrorist strategy approach, we're going to get it wrong militarily in what we're striking, which is wrong. And second, failure to bring together a coalition of convenience of the willing that will have to include nations that are often adversarial to us, Russia and Iran, and give in on some principled compromise like, you know what, Assad may not directly threaten us, that brutal dictator of Syria. Therefore, we want to have those nations pivot with us in a balance of power, bringing states together to take down the demise of the state of ISIS. That's the change that I would make sure our nation's bringing about.
So making sure that that there is a relationship with Russia. Obviously, the U.S. and Russia have been at odds over whether or not Assad can stay in power. You've also written recently that the U.S. should target oil fields in the fight against ISIS. And of course, just this week, U.S. warplanes, I think, targeted nearly 300 trucks used by ISIS to transport oil. We've seen Russia's defense minister saying they've destroyed over 500 more trucks. They've also hit a number of refineries. Is that enough, and what more should the U.S. be doing that it's not doing already? Obviously, these kinds of strikes targeting their source of income.
What we have to do is strike the true, as you pointed out, infrastructure that is giving upwards of $500 million a year from oil revenues. They are actually getting $1 billion a year from taxes, from oil, from selling wheat. What we have to do is strike down, which we haven't been doing until the French was given intelligence by us, the government institutions that are actually running that state. And second, if you've read recently, what we were doing was going against the refined products of the oil fields. We weren't going after the source, the crude. So they were still getting upwards of $500 million a year. We have to make sure our targeting destroys that infrastructure, because ISIS is only able to do what it does because it has about $2 billion in assets. It is taking in literally well close to $1 billion by ransom, taxes, and other means. No, this recent shift we done militarily with our strikes from just going on the battlefield to help the Kurds in Syria or to help the Baghdad forces in Iraq is a massive change to take the demise of the state-sponsored infrastructure that helps them to plan and get revenues end. We have to do that. But I would also say this, unless we diplomatically bring together those nations that have troops on the ground and have them do the ground confrontation, particularly in Syria, like Russia or Iran that has already lost 3,000 soldiers there, and have them pivot and against the demise of a common enemy, ISIS, with the cost would be too much for us to do. That's the real key under Secretary of State Kerry.
Retired Navy three-star admiral and former Congressman Joe Sestak, always good to see you. Thanks for being here this morning.
Good to be with you, Chris. Thank you.